Tuesday, May 5th, marked the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands by Canadian armed forces during World War II. That Tuesday, the celebration was muted thanks to the CCP virus, as instead of crowds of people gathering in squares throughout Holland and the Tulip Festival in Ottawa, there were now just empty squares with politicians making speeches in commemoration. Now, according to Robert Schmall for CBC News Opinion, he mentions that the Canadian liberators of the Netherlands in 1945 are now eclipsed by the Dutch military, and the tide has reversed in terms of military capability for defense, peacekeeping, and disaster relief operations. Back in World War II, Canada had multiple army divisions with hundreds of Canadian-built tanks and armored vehicles. Now, the Dutch military, on land, sea, and air, is now better equipped and technologically superior to the country that once fought so hard to liberate them. But it's nice to see that the people of the Netherlands keep the memory of the Canadian-led liberation of their country alive. One of my grandfather's nephews was actually there during the liberation of Holland, and he always said that he would do it again for the Dutch. He had great admiration for the Dutch people. So by fast-forwarding to now, it turns out that Canada's mobile land defense is supported by 80 aging Leopard tanks, many of which are second-hand purchases from the Netherlands. That's common knowledge. We have yet to replace those. And the Dutch are also complemented by newer tanks and armored vehicles with a fleet of recently upgraded, heavily armed Apache attack helicopters. Canada has no attack helicopters. I don't think we've ever had attack helicopters. And it really affects our capability during peacekeeping operations, most notably the one in Mali in 2018. What they had to do, according to this article, is soup up the old fleet of unarmed Griffin utility transport helicopters with improvised machine guns. That's like outfitting machine guns on an old MASH helicopter you saw in the TV show. Also, tragedy struck the Canadian military last week when a Canadian Forces chopper crashed into the Ionian Sea off the coast of Greece. The CH-148 Cyclone helicopter from the HMCS Fredericton was lost at sea with all 6 crew members. The 5-year-old helicopter was on its way back to the warship, was within 2 miles when it inexplicably plunged into the water. So that sounds like equipment failure right there, not human error. These things do happen, unfortunately, and my condolences goes out to the family of all 6 airmen on board. This brings into the deeper question of what goes on with the Canadian military, the problem it faces. See, the CH-148 Cyclone, which crashed into the water, is already considered an old, almost outdated helicopter. It was the replacement for the Sea King helicopter. And this is the problem with our military, is that when we need something, it doesn't get done. Now, the Sea King was our 1960s helicopter that was long past its retirement. And in 1986, the Progressive Conservatives under Mulroney were trying to replace it. And they picked the Augusta Westland EH-101. We changed government to Chrétien, and that contract was cancelled. And it results in a lengthy delay to the procedure. And it didn't take increased importance until the early 2000s, and another procurement competition was initiated. What it means is that the Sea King helicopter was kept in service long past the expiration date. I remember reading that for every hour the Sea King was in the air, took like 6 hours of maintenance to make sure it stayed up. So 2004, November, they finally awarded a $1.8 billion contract to Sikorsky to produce 28 helicopters with delivery scheduled to start in January 2009. As of 2018, we had 17 built. There have been a lot of delays, and Sikorsky has accrued over $88 million in late damages since 2008. So it's already been a flawed program, typical of Canadian procurement. For some reason, we screw this up so badly every time. And it comes to the federal budget, it also turns a blind eye to the Canadian military needs. The Liberals were promising a big defense plan because Trump called them out not too long ago about their commitments to NATO. But it turns out they cut defense spending in 2018 and are ignoring it in 2019. I know they did increase it, but it went to a lot of things for the troops, like medical needs, psychiatric evaluations, things like that, like soft military needs. Nothing hard. So Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan, he originally said that the Defense Policy Review in 2017, strong, secure, and engaged. Most people think that they've yet to deliver on what they've suggested, because Sajjan promised a whopping 70% increase in defense spending, from $32.7 billion up from $18.9. The idea was to build naval ships, combat support vehicles, and 88 fighter jets to replace through an open and transparent competition. But there's one disclaimer, according to this article. This would happen over the next decade, assuming the realities of 2017 remain constant. That's like predicting, and I agree with this statement, that's like any government predicting the military needs in 1942 based on the geopolitics of 1932. So 2017 was a quiet year, but now 2020 has turned out to be just a clusterfuck in terms of what's going on in the South China Sea and off the Straits of Hormuz. By 2025, there could be a change in government and we have to go through all this BS again. Anyway, Trudeau's not really much of a defense guy. He doesn't really care about the armed forces at all. The jet fighter fiasco is one of those things. The Liberal government of Chrétien joined the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter development. Harper's Conservative government didn't procure them, and Trudeau's government decided to start the whole process again, which means we're not getting any F-35s, which are the world's most advanced aircraft right now. Instead, they went out and bought some Super Hornets from Australia, so we're getting second-hand F-18s, while at the same time the Royal Australian Air Force is taking delivery of its first F-35s. We're keeping our fourth generation fighters instead of getting the fifth generation fighter that we need. Now this is what's wrong. The defense procurement is hamstrung by the petty politics and policy inertia, and also the change in governments. One government promises something, they don't really act on it, and then when the next government comes in, they scrap it entirely and go with their own, instead of keeping with what's been already under review and contracted. The acquisition process in Canada, according to General Hillier, is abhorrent. It's pointless to give the Department of National Defense increased spending if you then tie them in a Gordian knot where they can't actually spend the money. And that's what happens. I had a great uncle who was a base commander at Greenwood, in Nova Scotia, and he retired early because of this kind of thing. He was tired of the politics. Then you go to the 2020 military strength ranking by global power. They look at 50 different individual factors to give a nation power index score. They look at the military might and financials to logistical capability and geography. It's not perfect, but it works pretty good. Almost like Jane's defense. So Canada's sitting at 24th place. We are the 24th most powerful country in the world, I guess, according to global power. Sandwiched in between North Korea and Thailand. North Korea has a lot of troops, but their equipment's so old. That's why they're failing. That's why they're going to nuclear weapons, because they can't afford to replace all of their existing equipment with modern stuff. Thailand is going up. That's interesting. So is Vietnam, Poland, Spain, and Australia. So this is what it looks like. It looks at manpower, air power, land forces, the first three. We have just over 100,000 troops in our active and reserve personnel. I have a niece in the naval reservist, and I have a couple of cousins in the militia. 0.3% of the population serves in the military. Considering how much space we have, how much territory, and how much peacekeeping we do, that's not a lot of soldiers. Air power, we only have 62 fighters. 62 fighter jets. That ranks us at 31st overall, ahead of Iraq but behind Syria, Poland, and Indonesia. We're sandwiched between two war-torn countries. We have no attack helicopters, which is something we should be working on. And then when you go to tanks, we got 80 tanks and just under 2,000 armored vehicles. The armored vehicles are pretty good, I know that. The old LAV 25s. I actually used to build the armor for those 10 years ago, so I know what they can do. And when it comes to tank strength, we are currently 83rd in the world, tied with Mali and behind Republic of Congo, Qatar, Mozambique, Nicaragua, and South Sudan. Coincidentally, with the exception of Qatar, we give foreign aid to all those countries, yet we're behind them in tank strength. Naval forces. We have only 12 frigates and 4 submarines, along with 20 patrol craft. Considering that we have 3 oceans to defend, the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific last time I looked at a map, I'd say that sucks. We are 40th in naval power behind such countries as Cameroon, Vietnam, Israel, and Chile. Again, Cameroon, Vietnam, and Chile we give foreign aid to. And last time I looked at a map, they have smaller coastlines than we do. Natural resources, we are currently sit at 6th in the world. In consumption, we're 8th, but in proven oil reserves, we are the 3rd highest. Just going back to naval force and mine warfare, we have nobody in mine warfare. That's interesting. Logistics, we're currently 32. Merchant marine strength, 24th. Ports and terminals, 8th. Roadway coverage, 6th. Railway coverage, 5th. And serviceable airports, 4th. We got a lot of good airports. That's the only thing I can think of that. Our defense budget last year was at 22.5 billion US dollars, which is 15th. External debt is 1.6 trillion, which is not good. That's 12th. 866 billion US dollars in foreign exchange reserves and gold, mostly exchange reserves. and we're 16th in purchasing power parity. But really what we want to look at is the geography. We have a square land area of 9,900,000 square kilometers, which is second behind Russia. We have that much space, but we only have 64 aircraft and 80 tanks to cover all that space. Coastline, we have just over 200,000 square kilometers, which is #1 in the world. We are #1 for coastal coverage, but we're 12 frigates and 4 subs, and we're 40th overall. Interesting. Thank God we're right next to the United States. We've been coasting on their coattails for so long in terms of defense. I think it's a shame. I'm embarrassed by it, actually. So the federal government spends hundreds of millions of dollars to keep the CF-18s fighting fit. They're going to upgrade 36 of them, and then they bought 18 second-hand Australian F-18s, and we'll give them full upgrades. Don't get me wrong, the F-18 was a good fighter jet in its day. Now, according to John Paul Tasker, CBC News, July 23, 2019, Ottawa formally asked companies to make their pitches to replace the CF-18 jets. Again, this is nothing new. We've been doing this for the last 20 years, as the CF-18 is the 1983 jet, and we've had 138 of them. So we're using 37-year-old jets, and we just bought more of them. So they're now just trying to replace the decades-old CF-18s. So 4 companies are in the running to supply with 80 new jets. Quite frankly, we need 160 at least. So Saab of Sweden, Airbus Defence out of Britain, American firms Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So they have until the spring of 2020, which is probably delayed now because of the CCP virus, to submit their initial proposals to the $19 billion competition. A decision on the winning bid is not expected until 2022. So it's going to take 2 years for our government to figure out who they want. Christ, by that time it'll be even worse. And that's the biggest problem with Canada. Our military procurement process takes years, and even then it gets delayed constantly. Delivery of the first jets is expected by 2025. Had we stuck with the F-35, we would have had them by now. So that means the first phase of delivery is slated to occur more than 15 years after the former Conservative government and Harper began the process of buying new jets. You gotta be kidding me. 15 years. Shouldn't take that long. This is McLean's article from a couple years, from 2015 by Scott Gilmore, I found. The sinking of the Canadian Navy, and this is really true. You know, after World War II, we had the 3rd or 4th biggest Navy, and it's fallen since. We went from 3 aircraft carriers in 1945 down to about 1 in 1970, and then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau sunk the last one, the Bonaventure. We haven't replaced it since. So compared to our NATO allies, the Canadian Navy is only 1/3 the size it should be, given our GDP, and can only play smaller and smaller roles. So in 2005, we were sitting at a rank of 3, which is a multi-regional power projection ranking. And now we're just gone down to rank 5, which is offshore regional coastal defense navy, which means that we can't even assist anything. Pirates off the coast of Africa, assisting migrant refugees in the Mediterranean, evacuating Canadian nationals from a foreign war disaster like what happened in Iran or off the coast of China. Growing military tensions in the South China Sea. Christ, we need the U.S. Navy to escort one of our frigates through that zone. Supporting a United Nations peacekeeping mission. We're no longer capable of mounting anything. And that's what happened. Like, for most of your Canadian icebreakers would be unable to respond to a Russian challenge of our Arctic sovereignty. And that's true. The Russians have been heavily militarizing their Arctic zone because there's a lot of natural reserves of oil and gas up there. In a lot of cases, we would need the American Coast Guard to help us. If something like a ferry capsized, like this article says, or a major maritime accident. Now, what we have done is we have confirmed that we're going to buy a British-designed Type 26 surface combatant program. And this is the future frigate after surviving a legal challenge by a rival contender. That's the problem. We have two. We open it up for bids, and then the losers always challenge it. Instead of just going away and sticking with the right one, the loser always comes back and challenges. So we're going to build 15 planned warships in Halifax, cut steel sometime in the early 2020s. They haven't done it yet because right now they're currently building 6 patrol ships. So Alien, which is one of the rejected bids, tried to block this in federal court on the grounds that the Type 26 failed to meet speed and other requirements. And it wasn't dismissed until January 30th, 2015. An award of an initial $140 million contract to customize the Type 26, okay. Irving Shipyard is going to complete the last of 6 Arctic and offshore patrol ships, the Harry DeWolf class, before starting construction of this CSC lead ship. So this is going to replace our 12 recently modernized Halifax-class frigates and the 3 already retired and destroyed Iroquois-class destroyers. It's going to cost $45 billion, and it's a long time in coming. Now, as far as our submarines go, we have 4 of those. 3 in the Pacific, 1 in the Atlantic. These are Victoria-class British-built diesel electric. They were laid down back in the 80s, and we bought them from the British and took over in the 2000s, with the last one being 2015 after a massive retrofit. It was expensive. These ships have had a lot of problems. I think the corner brick caught on fire and had to be towed back. Just a lot of problems with these things. Canada technically needs 12 submarines. We need 6 in the Pacific, 4 in the Arctic, and only 2 in the Atlantic. So we need submarines that can go stay a long time under the water. Now, of our Halifax class frigates, they were pretty good back in the 80s. When they were built. You can see they were laid down 1980 and the last one was 1995. We have 7 in the Atlantic, 5 in the Pacific. It should more be like the other way around. So these are almost 30-year-old ships, depending which one you're looking at. And it's taken us this long to replace them. Again, it's the same problem. Every government makes a plan to buy new ships or replace these ships, and then it falls through. Harper was going to replace these, didn't. And then the Liberal government took over and did it again. Went through everything. The process again. Anyway, maritime coastal defense ships, we have 20 of these things. So currently the Canadian Navy is building the Harry DeWolf class offshore patrol vessels. These are supposed to be able to go up in the Arctic. When I was in Halifax in July 2018, they'd almost completed the Harry DeWolf, the first one they launched. And I could also see the second one, the Margaret Brooke, being built. So there's going to be 6 of these, and they're just patrol ships for the Arctic, but they're not armed with a heck of a lot. Now, also we don't have is the replenishment ship. This is another part of the national shipbuilding procurement strategy. So they want 2 multi-role vessels to replace the earlier Protector class auxiliary oil replenishment vessels. Like every other project with the Canadian military, it's suffered considerable delays. Announced in 2004, was to have been signed in 2009, first vessel 2012. But then the federal government changed it in 2010, and it wasn't finalized in 2011, so that'd be Harper. And currently, the federal government's in contract negotiations with the Seaspan Marine Corporation for building the joint project. So these things aren't even, supposedly the first one's already laid down. Seaspan, I believe that one is in Victoria, British Columbia. And for some reason, they changed the name from the Queenston and Shattaway to the Protector and the Preserver. Jesus Christ, we even have pansy names for our ships. I always love the Royal Navy ships, the Indomitable, the Illustrious, the Majestic, things like that. Quite frankly, we need about, like I said, we need at least 12 submarines and 36 frigates to really defend our coast and project power overseas. Even a small aircraft carrier and a cruiser would be nice. It's going to cost money, and people will say, where are we going to get the money? Well, I'd cut off foreign aid. We spent $6 billion on that last year alone. I'd rather build a ship with that. Use that to build a ship or a couple of fighters. So we really suck when it comes to building our armed forces. And the sad thing is, it'll take a war for the government to really wake up and decide we better do this now. And with the way things are heading in the South China Sea, it looks like war is going to be an option. China is really backed into a corner over their CCP virus that they unleashed upon the world accidentally, and that they really bungled the response. People are getting pissed off, and the CCP, in order to maintain power, might strike first. I can see it coming. And Canada will have to sit on the sidelines while our allies do all the heavy fighting. And the United States defends Canada for us. Anyway, any Canadians, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What you think we should do. Always frustrated with our government when it comes to this stuff. Anyway, until next time, this is Roman Sylvie, and this was the Great White North Report.